So now moving on to our next topic, I just wrote out graphic design and I chose this black letter typeface. You can select whatever you want. I just thought this might be fun. So essentially, when you use a typeface, you are using a file that exists on your computer to make the typeface. But if you go to like an external printer to go print or something, that computer that connects to that printer might not have the same fonts as you do. So to avoid this problem, what you can do is you can right click on your type and select create outlines. This turns your type into an object. So instead of being able to use the type tool and, change the text, everything here is now just vectorized and are just shapes. So what you can do is right click again and ungroup all of these letters. Once you've ungrouped them, you can actually use each of these letters separately or move them around however you like. You can also use the direct selection tool and actually adjust points on the typeface. So you can make things that look really weird, or maybe if one letter is a little bit not to your liking, you could adjust it a little bit. But you can make some cool stuff with this. Just remember that when you use your create outlines, you can't actually turn it back into editable type. So make sure that you have all your spelling correct. Make sure that this is exactly the way you want it to look like before you create outlines. I usually make a copy of my type so that I can always go back to it and change it. There are also some preset warps that you can do for your type. If you click this button, you'll see all these different options for warping. You can adjust all of these different positions that your warps can be, as well as the overall style of how your text is warped. Like I've said many times during this demonstration, some of these can look incredibly artificial, so only use them if you know what you're doing a specific style. Do not rely on these. You can also go to Object and Expand if you want to turn your warp type into an object. So it's sort of like creating outlines for text, only Expand works for basically anything that isn't text. The overall outcome is the same. Both result in an object that you can adjust using the direct selection tool or the regular selection tool. So for this last portion of this video, I'm going to talk about some different places you can actually find some type inspiration or learn about more fonts and get more familiar with the type world. Basically, I just compiled a few resources that I learned about throughout my time in CalArts. Hopefully they're helpful to you. So the first one is Google Fonts or fonts.google.com, which is an open source resource for fonts. I find that Google Fonts have been improving a lot over the last few years, so you can actually find some really great fonts here. Additionally, they have some pretty good UI UX where you can actually just select the styles of the font that you want. You don't have to download all of them. And in general, I think it's just pretty easy to use. If you're interested in coding or web design, I recommend you get pretty comfortable with Google Fonts since this is kind of the industry standard now, since you're able to embed these fonts directly into your code. So ultimately, this is a Google site, so it has pretty good UI, UX. It's pretty easy to figure out. It gives you a lot of options when you're actually browsing these fonts. So for example, there's all these different categories that we discussed earlier that you can organize your searches by. So here are all the serif fonts. If you're trying to find something specific for a phrase, you can always type it in here. I find this extremely helpful, especially when I'm designing something like a logo type or just need something for display. You can basically find a bunch of stuff here and it's all free, so I definitely recommend you check it out. The second resource is Adobe Fonts or Typekit. If you have a Creative Cloud account, this is already pre-installed into your account. Basically, Adobe made like a giant archive of free fonts that come with your subscription to Adobe. I think Adobe may have more fonts than Google. These are all licensed from other people, so it's sort of like Netflix, where you pay for the subscription and you get a bunch of cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff from like Emigre and Monotype and all these different places, so you can find some really high quality fonts here. So similarly to Google Fonts, you can select any one of these fonts and see all the different weights that it has. You can also type in sample text here, just like Google Fonts, which will allow you to see the specific characters that you want to see in a typeface. You can activate and deactivate every single one of these different fonts, and everything is on the cloud, so if you are running out of storage on your actual computer, you can deactivate it temporarily and clean up your computer. You can also always activate all 12 or however many weights it has with one click. You can also browse by category over here, or using the classifications just like Google Fonts. Adobe definitely has a much more robust system for searching and a much more robust collection of fonts in general. But of course, you are paying for this, so you would hope that their service is better than a free service. So just like Google Fonts, you can type in sample text to test out specific characters. You can see tons of pages of different fonts, and you can also sort by these different categories of style. It's definitely easy to navigate, so I recommend you just try and use this if you have an Adobe account. Something kind of cool that the Adobe Fonts has are these font packs, which are curated groups of fonts for specific purposes. So I'm just going to click this by the numbers one, and this one basically has like a bunch of typefaces with cool numbers. And you can actually even organize the sample text to just show you numbers so you can see what you like. So the next site that I'm going to show you is Fonts in Use. So this is basically an archive of different graphic design pieces organized by which fonts the designer used while designing them. This is a great place to see new fonts as well as seeing sort of what's trending. So like while I'm scrolling down, I see a lot of different popular fonts. This one, Love, by VJ Type, is one that I see on my Instagram feed all the time. So you can see different times different people have used this typeface. You can also see different typefaces that designers have paired with this specific typeface, which can give you inspiration if you're struggling to find something that looks good with it. And of course, each of these individual projects you can click on and read more about, learn more about, and see more in depth how the typefaces are used. The next resource is Typographica, which is a great blog about type and also graphic design. You can read a lot about a lot of cool things on here, and I recommend you just to check it out. You definitely can learn about a bunch of new typefaces through this site, even just their like collections of favorite typefaces, show you a lot of contemporary typefaces that came out in the last year, or 2 years ago. Oh my god. But in general, this is just a great place to find new things that you haven't seen before. The next resource is Type Everything. This is one of many sort of collective type foundries that feature a lot of different work from independent type designers. If you're looking for like the big type foundries, I recommend you just Google them. I find that, most people know or are able to find the big type foundries, but these independent designers sometimes get left in the back, even though they're making really amazing typefaces. If you have time, I recommend you just look through some of these. You can really see some cool stuff. I know that typefaces tend to be pretty expensive, but it's always good to support some independent designers. Typefaces are really difficult to make, so they really put their their heart and soul into each of these. So I recommend you take a look at some of them. So I'm really excited about this last site, which is Future Fonts, which was kind of a huge revelation when I found out about it. Future Fonts basically is a collection of work in progress fonts. So you really get to see what type designers are up to while they're still doing it and see what's up and coming. So because a lot of these typefaces are still in progress, you can usually download like free demos or trials, or get a really big discount on some of these really cool typefaces. A lot of really amazing type designers post their work here, and you can see some really amazing typefaces. So Min Sans has been a typeface that I've seen on Instagram a lot, and I've seen the designer actually give updates of this and post different updates to Future Fonts. So here you can buy for $96, or you can also download the trial that they have. A lot of type designers will have trial versions of their typefaces. So even if you can't afford a typeface, I will always say if you really want to use one, email the type designer and tell them you're a student who's really interested in their typeface. Sometimes they'll have a demo version that they can allow you to use for free, as long as you don't use it for any commercial work. So that's Future Fonts, and those were just a couple different resources. I hope some of them were new and helpful. I know this video was quite the long one, so thank you for sitting through it. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.